The Interstellar Naval Academy's crowning achievement wasn't its quantum-fold simulators or its planet-cracking theoretical physics department. No. What truly made the administrators puff up their various respiratory organs with pride was the Emotional Support Companion Program, a bureaucratic masterpiece that had taken 3 centuries of careful xenopsychological research to perfect. Station Harmony 7 orbited a particularly unremarkable star, which made it the ideal location for training the galaxy's future military leaders. Nothing exciting ever happened there, which was precisely the point. The Academy's designers had learned long ago that young beings with access to weapons of mass destruction needed a calm, controlled environment. Hence, the Companions. Dr. Echo had pioneered the program after the infamous Cadet riots of 2387, when a vegan battle class had attempted to overthrow the mess hall over subpar nutrient paste. The solution was elegantly simple. Assign each cadet a small, adorable creature specifically calibrated to their species' psychological needs. The vegans got fuzzy, round things that chirped pleasantly. The cetaceans received bioluminescent swimmers that pulsed in soothing patterns. Even the notoriously aggressive saurian species had been pacified with tiny, scaly companions that basked under heat lamps and made contented rumbling sounds. Instructor Vorthak surveyed his pristine classroom with the satisfaction of a being who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with proper organization and a 14-point inspection checklist. His scales gleamed under the standardized lighting, each one meticulously maintained according to Regulation 47B. The desks were arranged in perfect geometric precision, each equipped with its regulation companion habitat. At Station 1 sat Cadet Nexus, their crystalline form refracting light while a small geometric creature rotated slowly in its enclosure, projecting calming mathematical sequences. The crystalline species found comfort in patterns, and Dr. Echo had provided accordingly. Cadet Omphie occupied Station 2, her gills fluttering nervously as her aquatic companion performed lazy loops in its spherical tank. The equations were naturally anxious, prone to overthinking, and the rhythmic swimming patterns helped regulate their cardiovascular systems. Cadet Hex maintained perfect posture at Station 3, his compound eyes tracking the movements of 6 tiny insectoid companions that moved in perfect coordination. The insectoid species operated on hive mind principles, and solitary confinement could trigger psychological breakdowns. His companions provided just enough collective consciousness to keep him stable without overwhelming the individual personality the Academy was trying to cultivate. Each desk told the same story. Careful research, precise matching, predictable results. The companion program had reduced disciplinary incidents by 73%, improved academic performance by 41%, and eliminated the need for psychiatric interventions by an impressive 87%. The numbers didn't lie, and Vorthak lived by numbers. Administrator Pulse had personally overseen the implementation across all Academy facilities. His energy-based physiology made him ideal for bureaucratic work. He could process paperwork at the speed of light and maintain perfect filing systems across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously. He'd matched every species with their optimal emotional support configuration, cross-referenced against 17 different psychological assessment matrices. The morning routine proceeded with clockwork precision. Cadets arrived exactly 13 minutes before class commenced, performed their species-appropriate bonding rituals with their companions, and settled into focused academic readiness. The companions purred, chirped, hummed, or glowed as genetically programmed. Heart rate stabilized, stress hormones decreased, and attention spans reached optimal levels. Vorthak consulted his daily roster with the mechanical satisfaction of a being whose universe operated according to comprehensible principles. 23 cadets, 23 perfectly matched companions, 0 variables he couldn't account for. His teaching methods had been refined over decades to accommodate every known form of biological and synthetic consciousness in the galaxy. The vegans needed visual aids, The cetaceans required sonic integration, and the crystallines processed information through mathematical frameworks. He had lesson plans, backup lesson plans, and contingency protocols for 17 different types of classroom emergencies. The only notation that gave him pause was the final entry on his roster. Cadet Elena, human, companion assignment, pending administrative review. He'd been teaching for 47 standard years and had never seen that particular notation before. Humans were relatively new to the Galactic community, but surely, Doctor. Echo's department had conducted the necessary psychological assessments by now. The delay was probably some minor bureaucratic oversight, perhaps a form filed in triplicate instead of quadruplicate, or a psychological evaluation submitted in the wrong font. The Academy's reputation for precision existed for good reason. Every detail had been considered, every variable accounted for, every potential disruption carefully managed through proper procedure and appropriate preparation. The Emotional Support Companion Program was a testament to civilized society's ability to understand, categorize, and optimize the psychological needs of thinking beings across the galaxy. Vorthak activated his teaching interface and prepared to begin another perfectly ordinary day of molding young minds into competent military officers. His lesson plan was comprehensive, his materials were organized, and his classroom was a model of regulatory compliance. The companions were settled, the cadets were focused, and the morning light filtering through the station's viewing ports cast everything in a pleasant, standardized glow. In approximately 4 minutes and 17 seconds, Cadet Elena would arrive and complete his perfectly organized classroom environment. Whatever minor administrative delay had affected her companion assignment would surely resolve itself according to proper protocol. After all, the Academy had never encountered a psychological profile they couldn't match with an appropriate emotional support creature. The universe, in Vorthak's experience, was fundamentally logical. Problems had solutions, questions had answers, and every species had exactly the right kind of small, harmless, adorable creature to keep them psychologically balanced. He was about to discover just how spectacularly wrong the universe could prove even the most carefully maintained assumptions to be. The chronometer displayed exactly 800 hours when the classroom door hissed open with the punctuality that made Vorthak's cold reptilian heart sing with bureaucratic joy. His satisfaction lasted precisely 2.3 seconds, just long enough for him to register that Cadet Elena had arrived carrying what appeared to be a military-grade containment unit instead of the standard-issue companion habitat. The case was matte black, reinforced at the corners, and bore warning labels in 17 different languages. Most concerning was the soft, rhythmic thumping coming from inside, accompanied by what sounded distinctly like purring. If purring could somehow convey an unmistakable aura of predatory satisfaction. Cadet Elena moved with the casual confidence of someone who had never met a regulation she couldn't creatively reinterpret. Her uniform was technically correct down to the last pressed crease, but she wore it with the kind of easy authority that suggested she'd been born understanding that rules were merely suggestions for people who lacked imagination. She nodded politely to Vorthak, offered a cheerful, "Good morning, instructor," that somehow managed to sound both respectful and vaguely amused, and settled into the empty desk at Station 24. The other cadets' reactions provided a fascinating study in interspecies anxiety response. Nexus's crystalline form began refracting light in agitated patterns, their mathematical companions' geometric rotations becoming increasingly erratic. Omphie's gills fluttered rapidly as her aquatic companion dove to the bottom of its sphere and refused to emerge. Even Hex's perfectly coordinated insectoid companions had broken formation and were huddled together in the corner of their enclosure, their compound eyes fixed unblinkingly on Elena's case. "Cadet Elena," Vorthak began, his voice maintaining its customary professional tone despite the fact that his instinctive threat assessment protocols were activating for the first time in 3 decades. "I notice your companion assignment appears to be unconventional." Elena's smile was the kind that suggested she found the entire universe mildly entertaining. Oh, that. Yes, there was a bit of a mix-up in the requisition department. Apparently, someone in administration misunderstood the psychological profile requirements for humans. The thumping from inside the case grew more insistent, accompanied by what could only be described as an impatient growl. Elena absently tapped the side of the container in a rhythmic pattern, and the sound subsided into a low, rumbling purr that somehow managed to convey barely contained enthusiasm for violence. Vorthak consulted his teaching materials with the desperate hope that somewhere in his 47 years of experience, he had encountered a situation that prepared him for whatever was about to emerge from that case. His psychological assessment charts covered every known sentient species in the galaxy, their optimal learning environments, their stress responses, and their appropriate companion pairings. Humans, according to the preliminary data, were supposed to be relatively straightforward, pack-bonding omnivores with strong protective instincts and a tendency toward emotional attachment to smaller creatures. Perhaps, he suggested with the careful neutrality of someone trying to prevent an interstellar incident, you could explain the nature of this administrative error. Elena's expression took on the patient look of someone explaining a simple concept to a slightly slow child. Well, it seems the psychological evaluation department made some interesting assumptions about human emotional support requirements. They assigned me a pair of earth kittens, adorable little felines, very soft, excellent for stress relief. She paused, her smile becoming distinctly more predatory. Unfortunately, the genetics lab apparently confused kitten with cub. The word cub hung in the air like a verbal hand grenade with its pin removed. Every being in the classroom who possessed survival instincts, which was every being in the classroom, suddenly understood that they were about to witness something that would require extensive incident reports and possibly psychological counseling. Cubs, Vorthak repeated slowly, his teaching protocols struggling to process the implications, as in offspring of large predatory mammals. Earth tiger cubs, to be specific, Elena confirmed with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. Panthera tigris, apex predators, solitary hunters, currently about 8 weeks old, which means they're past the helpless kitten stage but still young enough to imprint on a pack leader. The containment case emitted another thump, followed by what sounded distinctly like claws scratching against reinforced metal. Elena checked her chronometer with the brisk efficiency of someone operating on a schedule. They're probably getting hungry, she mused. Growing predators have significant caloric requirements, and they get cranky when meals are delayed. Vorthak's threat assessment protocols were now operating at full capacity, running calculations on room evacuation procedures, emergency containment protocols, and the likelihood that his perfectly organized classroom was about to become a crime scene. His teaching experience had covered unruly cadets, equipment malfunctions, and even the occasional diplomatic incident, but nothing had prepared him for the possibility that a student would arrive carrying apex predators as emotional support animals. Cadet Elena, he said with admirable restraint, Academy regulations clearly state that companion animals must be non-threatening, docile, and incapable of causing physical harm to other students or staff. Elena nodded thoughtfully. Yes, I read those regulations. Very thorough. However, I should point out that nowhere in the Academy handbook does it specifically prohibit predatory companions, provided they're properly managed and contribute to the cadet's psychological well-being. Her smile became almost apologetic. I had my legal advisor review the documentation quite carefully. The soft purring from the case had taken on harmonics that somehow managed to convey both contentment and barely restrained hunting instincts. The other companions in the classroom had gone completely silent, their various species-appropriate behaviors suspended in favor of the universal survival strategy of not attracting the attention of things with large teeth. Vorthak realized he was facing the kind of situation that military academies were specifically designed to avoid, A student who had identified a loophole in the regulations and exploited it with the kind of ruthless efficiency that would make her an excellent officer and a terrible cadet to manage. The chronometer indicated that class should have begun 3 minutes ago, but normal teaching procedures seemed inadequate for the current situation. Somewhere in the administration offices, bureaucrats were probably going about their daily routines, blissfully unaware that their carefully crafted companion program was about to encounter its first true test case. Elena sat patiently, hands folded, waiting for permission to release her emotional support predators into a classroom full of beings whose evolutionary programming had spent millions of years learning to avoid exactly this scenario. The moment Elena opened the containment case, the carefully maintained ecosystem of academic tranquility collapsed faster than a neutron star's gravitational field. 2 orange and black striped bundles of concentrated evolutionary superiority tumbled onto the desk with the kind of graceful coordination that suggested they had been planning this moment since conception. The cubs were, objectively speaking, adorable. They possessed the large eyes, rounded features, and fluffy appearance that triggered nurturing responses across multiple species. They were also, subjectively speaking, absolutely terrifying to every creature in the room whose ancestors had survived long enough to pass on genes by recognizing apex predators and running in the opposite direction. The larger cub, Elena had apparently named him Chaos, stretched with the languid satisfaction of a creature that had never encountered anything it couldn't eventually eat. His sibling, designated Mayhem, immediately began investigating the classroom with the focused intensity of someone conducting a tactical assessment. Both cubs moved with the fluid confidence of beings who understood, on a cellular level, that they were the most dangerous things in any given environment. Vorthak's reptilian brain screamed at him to flee, climb something tall, or possibly dig a burrow and wait for the danger to pass. His professional training insisted that he maintain classroom decorum and follow proper protocol. The resulting cognitive dissonance left him frozen in place, watching with horrified fascination as 2 8-week-old predators began systematically establishing dominance over his perfectly ordered academic environment. Chaos padded to the edge of Elena's desk and fixed Vorthak with a stare that conveyed several important pieces of information. First, that he was aware of Vorthak's presence. Second, that he was evaluating Vorthak's potential as either threat or prey. And third, that he had reached a conclusion that did not particularly favor Vorthak's continued comfort. The cub's amber eyes held the kind of ancient wisdom that suggested his species had been perfecting the art of intimidation since before most civilizations had invented fire. Meanwhile, Mayhem had discovered that the classroom contained other animals and was approaching Nexus's geometric companion with the scientific curiosity of a researcher studying potential lunch options. The mathematical creature's rotations became increasingly frantic before it simply stopped moving entirely, apparently hoping that immobility might render it invisible to predatory attention. Perhaps, Vorthak managed, his voice maintaining professional calm through sheer force of will. We should contact administration to clarify the situation? Elena nodded agreeably. Excellent idea. I believe Administrator Pulse wanted to observe how well the cubs integrated into the academic environment. She glanced at her chronometer. He should be arriving any moment now. As if summoned by cosmic irony, the classroom door chimed and Administrator Pulse materialized, literally, given his energy-based physiology. His usual bureaucratic confidence lasted exactly as long as it took him to process the sight of 2 tiger cubs casually occupying student furniture, while every other creature in the room exhibited various stages of prey response. Cadet Elena, Pulse began, his energy form flickering with what could charitably be interpreted as administrative concern. I see you've unpacked your companions. Yes, sir. They were getting restless in containment, and I thought it would be beneficial for them to acclimate to the classroom environment. Elena's tone suggested this was a perfectly reasonable educational decision. rather than the controlled release of apex predators into a confined space filled with potential prey items. Chaos chose that moment to yawn, revealing an impressive array of developing teeth that would, in a few months, be capable of crushing bone. The sound was soft, almost musical, and had roughly the same effect on classroom morale as a fire alarm. Omphie's aquatic companion immediately buried itself in the sand at the bottom of its sphere, while Hex's insectoid companions had formed what appeared to be a defensive formation around their food dispenser. The psychological assessment indicated that humans require pack bonding opportunities with creatures that provide emotional security, Elena continued, scratching Mayhem behind the ears as the cub investigated the structural integrity of the desk's supports. Earth tigers are highly social during their juvenile phase, extremely intelligent, and form strong protective bonds with their pack leaders. They're perfect for reducing stress and providing emotional stability. Administrator Pulse's energy field rippled in patterns that suggested he was rapidly reviewing several centuries of bureaucratic protocols and finding them woefully inadequate for the current situation. The assessment also indicated that human companions should be, and I quote, non-threatening to classroom environments. "Oh, they're not threatening," Elena assured him with genuine sincerity. "They're babies. Look at those little paws." Everyone looked at the little paws, which were currently equipped with retractable claws designed by millions of years of evolution to tear through flesh with surgical precision. Chaos was using his to knead Elena's uniform sleeve with the contented purring of a creature that had found exactly where it belonged. Besides, Elena added thoughtfully, the psychological evaluation specifically noted that humans respond poorly to artificial environments and require authentic stimulation to maintain optimal mental health. What could be more authentic than a genuine predator-prey relationship establishing natural hierarchies in the classroom? Vorthak realized, with the horrible clarity of someone watching a carefully constructed worldview collapse in real time, that Elena was absolutely correct. The cubs weren't disrupting the classroom environment. They were revealing what the classroom environment actually was beneath all the bureaucratic organization and psychological management. Every regulation, every protocol, every carefully calibrated companion pairing had been designed to obscure the fundamental reality that some creatures were predators, some were prey, and the rest were just pretending otherwise. Mayhem had finished his reconnaissance and returned to Elena's desk, where he proceeded to demonstrate his species' legendary jumping ability by effortlessly leaping onto her shoulder. The movement was casual, graceful, and served notice to everyone in the room that the cubs could reach any location they chose whenever they felt like it. The other cadets sat in perfect stillness, their various companions having collectively decided that the safest course of action was to avoid drawing attention to themselves. The mathematical creature had stopped projecting patterns entirely. The aquatic companion remained buried in sand. Even Hex's coordinated insectoids had given up their hive mind activities in favor of individual survival strategies. "I believe," Elena said with the satisfied tone of someone whose experimental hypothesis had been thoroughly validated, "that the integration process is proceeding quite successfully." Administrator Pulse's energy field pulsed in patterns that suggested he was simultaneously trying to process the situation, review emergency protocols, and calculate the paperwork requirements for explaining to the Academy Board why a routine companion assignment had turned his orderly educational facility into a demonstration of predator-prey dynamics. 3 weeks later, the Interstellar Naval Academy had developed an entirely new understanding of what constituted normal classroom dynamics. The official incident report, filed in septuplicate and cross-referenced across 14 different administrative databases, classified the Tiger Cub integration as a qualified success with ongoing behavioral observations recommended. What the report failed to capture was the profound philosophical shift that had occurred in Instructor Vorthak's teaching methodology. He had discovered, much to his surprise, that conducting lectures while 2 apex predators lounged casually on student furniture had actually improved his pedagogical effectiveness. Nothing focused attention quite like the knowledge that the classroom's food chain had been fundamentally reorganized. Chaos had claimed the thermal regulation unit beneath the window as his personal territory, transforming what had once been a sterile piece of environmental equipment into a royal throne from which he could survey his domain. His presence had eliminated the chronic tardiness problem that had plagued Vorthak's morning sessions. Cadets now arrived precisely on time, took their assigned seats with military efficiency, and maintained perfect attention throughout the lesson. Mayhem had appointed herself head of security, a position she took seriously despite her 8-week-old interpretation of threat assessment. She conducted regular patrols of the classroom perimeter, investigated any unusual sounds with professional thoroughness, and had developed an uncanny ability to detect when students were passing notes or engaging in unauthorized communication. Her methods were gentle but unmistakable. A soft paw placed on the offending cadet's desk, accompanied by direct eye contact that conveyed patient disappointment. The other companions had adapted to their new circumstances with varying degrees of success. Nexus's geometric creature had resumed its mathematical projections, though the patterns now incorporated distinctly survival-oriented calculations. Omphie's aquatic companion had emerged from its sand burial and discovered that the rhythmic movement of tiger cubs provided an oddly soothing counterpoint to its swimming patterns. Even Hex's insectoid collective had reorganized themselves into a more efficient configuration, apparently inspired by observing apex predators coordinate their activities. Elena maintained her role as pack leader with a casual competence that had initially terrified the administrative staff and now commanded their grudging respect. She had submitted detailed care protocols, established feeding schedules that coincided with classroom breaks, and implemented environmental enrichment activities that doubled as practical demonstrations of predator behavior for xenobiology coursework. Commander Apex had arrived to conduct her official inspection with the grim determination of someone expecting to authorize major facility repairs and extensive psychological counseling for traumatized cadets. She departed 3 hours later with signed authorization for expanding the companion program's parameters, and a request for Elena to provide consultation on alternative emotional support strategies for high-stress military environments. Dr. Echo had spent 2 sleepless cycles reviewing their psychological assessment algorithms and grudgingly concluded that the original evaluation had been more accurate than intended. Humans, they determined, did not require soothing, harmless creatures to manage stress. Humans required authentic challenges, genuine responsibilities, and the opportunity to exercise their species' legendary pack-bonding instincts with creatures that could theoretically eat them but chose not to. The revelation had prompted a comprehensive review of companion assignments across all Academy facilities. Several other species had requested upgrades to their emotional support animals, though none had been quite brave enough to specify apex predators. The crystalline cadets had petitioned for geometric companions with sharper edges. The Equations wanted swimming partners with more aggressive territorial behaviors. Even the typically conservative Saurian delegation had expressed interest in companions with enhanced thermal regulation capabilities and predatory aesthetics. Administrator Pulse had initially viewed the situation as a catastrophic failure of bureaucratic oversight. He now considered it a masterpiece of adaptive policy implementation. The companion program's success metrics had improved across all categories: stress reduction, academic performance, disciplinary incidents, and something entirely new called authentic species-appropriate psychological engagement. The numbers were so impressive that other military academies had begun requesting detailed implementation guidelines. Vorthak had submitted a formal recommendation that Elena be assigned to advanced xenopsychology coursework, with particular emphasis on interspecies behavioral dynamics. Her natural aptitude for managing apex predators, he argued, suggested she possessed exactly the kind of unconventional problem-solving skills that the galaxy's increasingly complex diplomatic landscape required. Her ability to turn a bureaucratic oversight into a revolutionary educational opportunity demonstrated the kind of strategic thinking that military leadership demanded. The cubs themselves had settled into their new environment with the satisfaction of creatures who had successfully established themselves at the top of their chosen ecosystem. Chaos had learned to moderate his territorial displays during examination periods, limiting himself to meaningful looks rather than actual prowling. Mayhem had developed a sophisticated understanding of classroom etiquette, reserving her security patrols for moments when they would least disrupt the educational process. Elena's academic performance had improved by 37%. Her stress indicators had decreased to nearly undetectable levels, and her psychological evaluations indicated optimal emotional stability. The cubs provided exactly the kind of authentic social interaction that human psychology required. Relationships based on mutual respect, clear communication, and the understanding that pack leadership was earned through competence rather than assigned through regulation. On this particular morning, as Vorthak prepared to begin another day of lectures enhanced by the presence of purring apex predators, he reflected on the curious way the universe had of correcting even the most carefully planned systems. The Academy had spent centuries developing the perfect program for managing young military minds, creating safe, predictable environments where every variable could be controlled and every outcome could be anticipated. It had taken one human cadet and 2 tiger cubs to demonstrate that perfection was not, perhaps, the point. The goal was not to eliminate all challenges and uncertainties, but to provide the right challenges and the right uncertainties, the ones that revealed character, built confidence, and prepared young beings for a galaxy that was neither safe nor predictable. Elena entered the classroom carrying a new accessory. A regulation tactical vest sized for tiger cubs, complete with academy insignia and rank indicators. The cubs, it appeared, had been officially enrolled as auxiliary personnel.